Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final episode of the Strength Students podcast. Ooh. Yeah. Dun, dun, dun. But not the final episode of the show. We're just changing our shit up.
Yep, just our names.
Yeah. If you guys have been keeping up with our social media, we are now going to be called the Strength Squad, and you will call us that.
You will report to us.
So what do we got for you today, guys? We have our fucking main man, Cory Schwarzkopf. General Cory Schwarzkopf. Fat extraordinaire, to talk to us about fats today and the benefits of fats and why we eat them.
And why he's so handsome.
Yeah, and why he's so awesome. So today's episode, which will be number 70, we will have Cory Schwarzkopf. But before we start anything, let's open this bitch up with a little dad joke, courtesy of Dr. Nick. Oh. How do you find Will Smith in a snowstorm? You look for the fresh prints of his feet in the snow. Thank you, Dr. Nick. That one's for you, bro. That one was absolutely for you. Announcements, guys. Yeah, make sure you guys go to our social media. Go like our Facebook page. Go follow us on Twitter. Go follow us on Instagram. Then to our cars after that. Then go to our YouTube, man. Check it out. Leave some comments. Go check out our videos. We got a lot of great content up there. So it's good stuff. So check out our YouTube. And then go ahead, check out iTunes and Stitcher. Leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and on Stitcher. We really appreciate that. That stuff helps us out a lot. So thanks. I mean, if I could, I would go to your guys' job and leave you guys a 5-star review on Stitcher and iTunes as well.
If we can do anything to help, let us know.
If you guys have businesses on Yelp and you need reviews, just let us know, and we'll do it.
That's right.
I think it's about time. Slide into those DMs, send some news. So what do we got this week, Nick?
We have an article on fats.
Oh, wow.
Weird.
Who would have thought?
From Precision Nutrition.
They know what's up.
Yeah, and we'll get into a lot of it in the episode, but fats get this weird, have gotten this role in people's heads for nutrition that, fat will make you fat, and what is a fat?
It's not right.
Right, like that
right.
word, they think like body fat and fat, it's just this will explain what fats actually are, like down to their like scientific molecular level.
Right.
Cory goes through that a lot, but if you listen to the episode and you still want to know more, this article will help you kind of figure it out. And yeah, I really like Precision Nutrition. I mean, they're always on point.
They're dope, man. They're so precise.
Everything they're so precision about nutrition.
That didn't make sense.
Whatever. I don't make sense. But yeah, check out that article. It's great. It breaks down types of fats, what they are, what you should be eating, benefits of fats, all that. We'll get into that in the episode. But again, if you want to read more, that's the article to hit up.
All right. Sweet. All right, guys, without further ado, hold on tight, buckle your goddamn seatbelts. So we got Cory Schwarzkopf talking about fat benefits.
Especially if you're in the car.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll get into fats with Cory.
Yeah.
BRB. Want more of the Strength Students podcast? Go check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, make sure you leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and on Stitcher. Stitcher, I just met her. And just make sure you're in that. Oh my God. make sure you're in that.
Yeah.
All right. So we're here with General Cory Schwarzkopf in White Plains, Connecticut. Remember last time?
I remember now, yes.
Yeah, no, we're in New York.
So we're with Cory here. If you guys remember episode
18 and 19 or 19. Yeah, 18 and 19.
Yeah, and we talked about low carb.
Yep.
And we're here with Cory today talking about fat.
It's good to be back with you guys.
Welcome back, bro.
I appreciate you guys coming down early on a Saturday. So
yeah,
you guys were here before me. So good for you guys.
I slept the whole way down in the car.
You looked like you were sleeping when I got in here.
I'm still sleeping.
Yeah. Nick was all jacked up on that espresso shots, whatever. Go,
dude.
So real quick, just tell our audience, our fans, who are you? What are you doing? All that.
Yep. So again, good to be back on the show with you guys. So grew up with Nick, and through Nick met Steve and you guys, and now I am doing medical device sales. This came up last time. So it's pretty cool. Spend a majority of my time in the OR. And it's just my theme throughout, even when I was in school, into grad school, even, first out of college, was always science-based, whatever I did, whether it was functional exercise physiology, clinical nutrition, and then even this now for surgery. It's always based in literature. It's always based in science. It's always based mostly in anatomy and physiology. And that's what I do. Spend most of my time, kind of preparing for surgeries, not doing them myself, of course, but helping doctors do them. And, there's a sales aspect to it. So you want to be on your game in terms of, what your products have to offer, why, certain instrumentation and techniques are better than others. And you're talking to very intelligent people. You're not just talking to two schleps like you. You're talking to...
All right, fuck you, man.
Thanks, bro.
You're talking to really intelligent people. So you have to bring your A game pretty much every day.
Nice.
And it's cool. They haven't fired me yet, so I'm still here.
And so what's your history with studying as far as... the first episode we had you on with carbs and now fats, like what's kind of your history with that?
Sure.
Studying that?
Yeah. So it all stemmed in undergrad for me. I was in an intro to nutrition class. I was standard, oatmeal in the morning before you play sports. And,
nice.
I need energy before I go out there and play lacrosse. So I have bread and I was in an intro to nutrition course, and it was, I think as most people should with college, you just start questioning basic things.
Your sexuality?
That was one of them. And you just question certain things. And I had a professor that was very fortunate to, he kept his personal bias out of the our class, but him and I were able to have conversations, and he first got me into really low carb metabolism, and part of why we're in such a shitty situation with health in the United States and childhood obesity and all these things. And then that was coupled with being an undergrad at Springfield in one of the best exercise, science programs in the country. You just naturally have to be good at literature. You have to be able to read.
Gotcha.
You have to be able to know what a peer-reviewed journal is, and different variables, randomized controlled trials. You have to know what that stuff is. And it just kind of was fun. Like, I enjoyed learning about that stuff. I enjoyed applying it. I obviously enjoy talking about it and sharing it with people. So that's always just been the backbone. And then the nutrition aspect of it stayed with that professor that I worked with into grad school. I was his fellow. So I got to do direct research. We did one on postprandial lipemia, which was a big study, which is pretty much what happens to fats after you eat. Actually, I was a subject for that. I was a control. So I had to sit on a couch all day for 6 hours. I got paid $100 to sit on a couch and eat either low fat or low carb pudding. It was blind. It was a double blind, so I didn't know.
Holy shit!
I couldn't move. So I had to sit there for 6 hours, and they took blood.
$100
to eat pudding. It was all in grad school. Are you kidding me? And so whatever. And so then after grad school, I was doing some exercise physiology work. We talked a little bit last time, cardiovascular rehab. But still, you're always going to be around science. You're always going to be around, that type of literature. And the nutrition aspect of it has always stayed with me. And then before I was doing what I'm doing now, I was doing exercise physiology work. I was doing personal training. I had a metabolic rehab program within the facility that I was working at. And then that's when I got into the Gray Institute stuff, and we'll get into it once we get there, but it's a little bit different because it's actually kind of hard to actually quantify that. If someone goes from back pain to no back pain, yeah, you can give them a scale 1 to 10 of how they're feeling, but how do you actually get quantifiable data from that? You can't. So there's a level of, okay, this is working, we're getting real results, but then it's hard to replicate from a data perspective because you can't get, X plus 5 or, X minus, you can't really get that. So, so science has always been the core of it all.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So you've taken part in not only studies, but you've also had real world application. You worked with, it was diabetes patients, right?
Yep,
or
exactly.
Those with diabetes, yeah.
Yep. So I worked with individuals with diabetes, and before that I was doing cardiac rehab.
Nice.
So cardiac rehab, we were working with people, like I said, kind of post MI, post stroke, post heart attack. One guy was a heart transplant. People that were even just at risk. It was a little mundane. We're doing good work, but it was very like
it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, and so I just needed a little bit more. So I was able to go to a facility in Mamaroneck that I was able to do personal training at, and then they gave me the flexibility to really get more into the diabetes stuff. So I started the diabetes program there. And it was always a little tough when you're working with that population because like, hey, we're at this Westchester elite private studio, facility. And then you have people coming in that, they have their own health issues and they don't feel as comfortable being there. So
nice.
It was important to make them feel comfortable. These people that might not look the same as you have their own issues, right? We all have shit going on.
Absolutely.
So it was just, making sure we're all on the same playing ground and learn from them too, whatever they have to offer. So that was a fun, I enjoyed the 2.5, 3 years that I did that.
Word.
So made it here.
All right. So let's just dive right into it. What we want to do is we kind of want to, there's been all this talk about like carbs and fats and what is good, what is bad. Carbs are good, carbs are bad, fat's good, fat's bad. Like we want to just put out there, all right, what are the basics about fats? What are they? What are they doing in our body and the benefits? So let's just start there, man. What is fat and what, not only dietary fat, but the fat that we the fat that we have the fat that we have in our body. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So fat is it's a dirty word, right? People, it's all over the place. It kills us. It makes us fat.
Fat makes you fat. Yeah, causes global warming, heart disease.
Right, exactly. We don't. People, it's unknown, really, for like the general population for the most part. It's a macronutrient. It's one of 3 carbs, fats, and proteins. So the 3 components of fat: you have saturated fat, unsaturated fat, trans fats.
Okay.
Saturated fat, most people believe that that's the bad one. That's the one that's found in red meat. That's the one that's found in butter. That's the one that gives us heart attacks, right? That what makes it saturated is that every bond is matched. So every carbon bond is matched. So it's fully saturated. So that's part of the reason why at room temperature, saturated fats are actually hard, right? Butter, meats, cheeses. Right. It's a saturated compound. It has everything that's there. That's also, once you get into the actual properties of it, why it's better to cook with those type of fats, because they have their level to become rancid and to become oxidized with heat is much higher than other fats, because they're
higher, like a smoke point. You mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Great. Exactly. So they're literally saturated. They're very strong molecules. Then you have your unsaturated fats. And that's just where the double bond exists. So a mono unsaturated fat means that there's one unsaturated fat, one double bond. Okay. And so that gives you a little bit more. It still has some of the properties of a saturated fat, but it doesn't have really the negative properties of a polyunsaturated fat, which is multiple double bonds. So not to get too lost in it, but if you actually look physically at a mono unsaturated fat, like an extra virgin olive oil or something like that, it still has like that viscous property. It's not as solid as a saturated fat, but it's not as,
it's not water.
It's not water, and it's not like some of the shittier poly unsaturated vegetable oils that we see everywhere now. They're easy to process, and they're cheaper, and that was part of and then the third fat is trans fats. Mm-hmm. Those are man-made, straight up. Like, you don't see those in nature. And it's easier to cook with. Sometimes it tastes better. But that's where you have like your Crisco and all that other stuff, and even just like I said, the really cheap vegetable oils.
Okay. So real quick, going through those, the saturated, unsaturated, trans, talk about maybe a dietary example of each of those. Like what are the examples of each of those?
Yeah, right. So you're gonna have your saturated fats, right? Those are gonna be like the red meat. Well, even before we get into that and not getting it off on a tangent with it, when you eat a food, it's tough to actually have just one. Like even a steak.
Yeah, right.
Even a 20-ounce porterhouse steak is going to have a little combination of saturated fat and polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated.
So we're talking majority then.
Yeah, exactly. But generally, your red meats, things that are found in nature, cheeses, animal products, those are going to be butter. Those are your saturated fats.
So would you say a good would you say animal products is essentially a good way of saying it? Okay,
exactly.
Cool.
And again, things that are just a little bit more natural. Like you don't really have to process saturated fats. They're kind of there for us for the taking. I mean, I guess butter you kind of you somewhat have to process, but still, for the most part, those are there for the taking. And then your unsaturated fats, your monounsaturated fats. That's where you get like your like avocados, nuts, some of like your better vegetable oils, or I guess like your extra virgin olive oils and some of those stuff. And then your polyunsaturated fats, that's where you get like the corn oil. Like really the cheaper end of your vegetable. Yeah, exactly. And to be completely honest, I get confused on like which ones are which. I know people are using like flaxseed oils and this and that. Yeah. I'm somewhat of a minimalist, like on a personal level with that. So, I like know if I'm going to cook, I'm going to use like extra virgin olive oil or butter or, like kind of straight up like that. And even back to the, one of the trends you're seeing now is like, the coconut oil. I believe it's the highest saturated fat food of them all is coconut and coconut oil. I could double check that, but I'm almost certain. So it just doesn't look, people are like, oh, like that fat on a steak is like going to clog my artery, and they feel a little bit better, having the coconut oil just because it's like coconut oil and it's a lot more complex. Yeah. But those are pretty much some of the basic examples of where we find that, but it's foods that and then the trans fats, like I said, that's just like man-made and garbage. They're garbage. They're garbage. Both people in the low fat world and people in the low carb world both agree.
Yeah, that's the one thing they agree
on. Yeah, right. No,
these are terrible.
That and now it's like sugar. Like we agree that sugar's different, but the low fat people were plugging that in a lot. So
essentially,
earlier.
Trans fats are like fake fats.
They are. And if you look into like the actual molecule with it, there's two ends to the fatty acid chain, and essentially with a trans fat, like the makeup of it's like a trans model. Like that's like where it gets its name from. What's worth noting with it is that it's just not seen in nature. Like that's literally
that's all you got to say.
That's
for
it.
Me. I'm like, okay, all right.
Yeah, it's not found.
Not for me.
Anywhere. So you have your polys, your monos, your saturated, found in nature, different processing models to get there. But yeah, trans are garbage.
Gotcha. All right, so that's kind of a quick overview of fats and what they are. Now, we'll start with how did we get to the point we're at? You said it off camera before. What was
lipophobia?
Lipophobia. Yeah. Right.
So how did we get to this point of lipophobia? Maybe not so much now, but if we're looking to a couple years back, now the science and research is coming out. Fat's not so bad, but there still are debaters of that.
100%.
So how did, especially like certain organizations, like, if you look at like the American Heart Association,
oh my God,
I mean, that's,
Diabetes Association. Yeah.
That's the American Heart Association, and they're still like, fat's bad.
Don't have cholesterol in your eggs.
Yeah. And you have all this pushback from a lot of research that goes on saying, no, like fat is good. And now we're still tangled in this war of like, fat's bad, fat's good between these corporations.
Fat makes you fat.
Right.
It makes it tough because, you have papers and studies and books coming out saying fat's bad, but then you have the American Heart Association, which, for the most part, people are going to be like, oh, well, it's the American Heart Association, so they must be right. So it makes things confusing for people.
No, 100%.
So how did we get to this point?
It's a good question. It's a loaded question. There's a lot of parts to it. I think that if you had to kind of summarize it in kind of one phrase, it was really poor science. So, part of it started Well, if we quickly back up, we've been eating fats for a very long time, right? I mean, if you believe in evolution, you're going to have to believe in we derived our molecular backbone from fats. That's just what it was. Agricultural revolutions, only about 10,000 years old. So that's very, very recent in terms of an evolution standpoint. So majority of our foods were fats, animal fats. So that's what we derived ourselves from. So
like a long, long time ago, there wasn't like wild bread running around.
Zero.
It's
Right. There wasn't even like corn, there wasn't even like broccoli, and I'm not saying that, broccoli's bad at all. I mean, green leafy vegetables, but a lot of these were, you had to eat what you kill, and that was what was available to you. Fruits were like a dessert; they would be there sometimes, but that's one of the foundations that I, on a personal level, always like, all right, if you're going to go against that we haven't derived from this, then you got to argue with evolutionists. Like, I'm not having that argument because it's a waste of my time.
Not my side.
It's just, it's
not my thing.
It's like arguing gravity. I'm not.
I have an ex-phys degree.
I'm not dealing with that. So really, how do we get into this? I think it was like the 30s and 40s when we started. We had modern technologies that were able to diagnose cardiovascular disease. And so I forgot what the span was. It was like a 5-year span that cardiovascular disease in the United States jumped like 400%. And people were like, what the hell is going on here? And I was like, well, we're actually just being able to diagnose it now through echocardiograms and EKG, same thing.
So it wasn't that it was more prevalent. It was that they could actually find it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. No. And so then that's where it was like, okay, hold on. Like, people are dying from this, right? So like cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, so what is this? And so a lot of the parallels kind of started with, well, what do we consume? America was consuming a good amount of meat, butter, eggs, this and that. And so it was one of those, and this is where I go back to the weak science aspect of it. It's like, okay, well, we're having a lot of fats in our diet. We're having a higher rate of cardiovascular disease. Literally, it's like fat causes cardiovascular disease. That was like kind of where the premise of it started. Gary Taubes, Good Calories, Bad Calories, like that's the book that really does an excellent job of getting into that and the politics with it. And then
he's done a ton of research too.
He's
like
the man.
Around the globe.
And Gary Taubes is he always comes out like he's not a scientist. He is a journalist. And so he reports on what scientists find. He's a very interesting guy. I got to meet him before through Dr. Wood at Springfield. I got to see a couple of his presentations. He's one of my heroes. He really is. But he really talks about, the name that always comes up with that is Ansel Keys. That's like, that's the name that always comes up. And, he's a gentleman who, from what people say, was pretty sharp. He sounded like he was like a modern day salesman. Like he was really on point. He kind of had a boisterous attitude. He was able to really influence people. And he really pushed hard the, fat makes us fat causes cardiovascular disease. And there were some, if you look at epidemiological studies, large scale studies early on, they might find, I remember we talked about this in our podcast last time, like they might find, people that have higher rate of cardiovascular disease potentially have higher consumptions of fat, but it's not accounting for what else you're consuming with that, and that's at the same time that we start having, more modern technologies for food. You're starting to see the mass production of flour, of wheat, of corn, a lot of these cheap, really nutritionally empty foods. And so now the metabolism of fat with carbohydrate versus metabolism without fat are two different metabolisms. And then that all trickled into George McGovern, the senator from Minnesota. He put together kind of the first panel for regulating food, essentially. It was like the precursor to the food guide pyramid. This is a dude who has no nutritional background who started this. Senator, right. No nutrition. And you could have a nutritional background and be a senator.
Right,
which I hope to do one day, but he had none of that, and so that bled into the food guide pyramid, and we just fucked up. I mean, it was bad. Like, if you look at even just basic graphs from 1977 until now, I mean, the slope of that graph for obesity is just, it's unprecedented. What you see in cardiovascular disease. So the real issue, it wasn't just reducing fats, which has its own health problems, which we'll get into. It was replacing fats with carbohydrate. Oh. And that's bad news. Anytime you take a food out for, even when I work with, people on a one-to-one level with nutrition, if you take a food out, you have to replace it with something. Or you're just going to be stuck with oh, great, I can only eat avocado and nuts and a bunch of water all day. It's that's not living, Right. So, that was something that, kind of came up with that. But, that's kind of where it was really poor science. Association.
Well, and going back to that too, Ansel Keys was a guy who, from his research, he left out a bunch of shit. Decided not to put stuff in.
You're 100% correct. The 7-country study. That's the one that always comes up. And he cherry picked. It was 7 countries that had around the world that had higher rates of cardiovascular disease with higher saturated fat intake. 22 countries were in the study. So he cherry picked the 7.
Perfect.
Didn't control for variables like smoking. Didn't control for variables with and actually, was it that study or no? So that was poor science. And then even more recently, the China study, which is one of the studies that looks like that. And it was actually pretty cool. So the China study is pretty low fat. Promoting, and there was some grad student or someone who's really into the numbers who after that data got presented, took all really the raw data and ran it and actually found that the highest correlations between cardiovascular disease and food consumption was with grains. It wasn't even carbs, it was grains specifically. So it comes down to really poor science. And to kind of wrap that part up, it puts people in a position of distrust. Mm-hmm. It puts people in and there's 2 sides to that coin, because I always hear sometimes they're telling us this and now they're telling us that. And it's well, partially that's how science works, right? It's all about trying things. That's the way progression works. So you kind of have to deal with that. But then there is the other set of we had a really strong foundation for 30 years of what was healthy. Yeah. And those people kind of got screwed a little bit. I wish I could say it differently. Some people worked out fine. Some people have issues with weight with it, but then cardiovascular disease, diabetes, all that type of stuff. So really poor science is what I would say led to this lipophobia of us being afraid and petrified of fats.
Word. And so let's kind of spin it to the other side of things now. We're kind of trying to or attempting to come out of this lipophobia stage in our in our civilization, whatever you want to call it. So where are we now? What we're learning the benefits of fats and what they do in our body and why they're good for us. So let's talk a little more about that.
Yeah, totally. No, that's what you're really seeing is, justice from a scientific perspective, research perspective. People are conducting really good research. And, this really, I would say a lot of these, so you have Dr. Atkins' diet revolution, right? So a lot of these kind of papers really started in the late 1800s. You see some of them with people that, they would determine people were diabetic from sugar in their pee. That's how they would diagnose, and flies would go to it. So the point is they realized, that's how they knew
they
that
still
there was
do that
sugar.
now, right?
Yeah. That's how they knew that sugar was in the pee. And so they realized that was early onset diabetes, or no, that was diabetes just diagnosed 10, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they would put them on essentially a low carb diet at the time. So no baguettes, no potatoes. So this has been around for a while. And this also goes into our conversation about evolution, right? That wasn't available. So we had that all there. The food guide pyramid, the trends, and there was people that were hold on, something's wrong here. And actually a part that I left out with Ansel Keys, there was a lot of resistance to him at the time. There were a lot of like real good scientists who weren't as attractive as him. They weren't as good looking as him. They didn't speak as well as him, and they got completely shoved away. And so there were people that were like, this is an issue. Like, this is bad. And so in really like the 80s into the 90s, Dr. Atkins, you really started to see people do research for low carb. And you're seeing a lot of that data come out now, 10, 15, 20 years, where it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, the research that not only shows the benefit of health of fats, but then also the consequence of such high carbohydrate consumption and poor carbohydrate choices. So your question was
so if you could give like we'll kind of break it down by saturated, unsaturated, polyunsaturated, all that, but first just one blanket, like, all right, what are fats doing in our overall, what are like the biggest jobs of fats and benefits in our body?
What do they actually do for us?
So if I had to kind of give that one sentence with it, it's really the foundation to cellular metabolism. It's really cholesterol and fats are really they're in every single cell of our body. They are the precursor to hormones. So you even see it with something with like calcium deficiency in the United States and people being low with like vitamin D. Vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. And the precursors for that are derived from sometimes not necessarily vitamin D specifically, but like bile, these things that are derived of cholesterol and fats. So when you're really looking kind of down the chain, if we're not having those basic, really the foundation to those hormones that are needed, then up the chain, you're not going to have the synthesis that you need. You're not going to have the ability to absorb this. So it's like, all right, we're low on calcium, let's drink more milk. And it's like, that's a really poor way of doing it. I remember hearing someone say once, supplementing with calcium to take care of like osteoporosis, it's like throwing a bunch of bricks in your backyard and expecting a patio to be built. It's like, yeah, we're kind of we're trying to sprinkle in some of the things, but if we're not taking in what we need, we're screwed. So that's just like one small example of where we have that. But then there are people, myself and real scientists, not me, but real scientists, who, they even go further for like, cardiovascular health. Like, these fats are actually important for cardiovascular health. They're important for metabolic health. The thing that I've personally been looking more into is mental health, right? I mean, this is a real issue that it affects all types of people in society. And there's a mental aspect of it. We were talking before the Framingham Heart Study. So that was a study that was done in Framingham, Massachusetts. I think it's still ongoing. I think it's I forgot exactly when it started, maybe the 70s or 80s, but it was just of a whole town. And that's where they established cigarette smoking, causes death. That's where they established, high cholesterol is generally associated, which is a little bit of an asterisk next to that. We can talk a little bit more about cholesterol. But some of like the basic things that we kind of take for granted as being associated with death. And one of the researchers afterwards, they found a couple interesting things. They found that people that had the lowest rates of dietary cholesterol, so on the lowest scale, had higher rates of overall death. So, dietary cholesterol and cholesterol in our body it's a safety. It's something that we're supposed to use to help the body regenerate cells. It's supposed to, I heard someone say blaming cholesterol is like blaming firefighters for a fire. Because you see them at the fire and you go, oh, this is bad. And that's like, well, no, there's inflammation that's causing issues. And cholesterol is just there to try to kind of help out. But they also found in the Framingham Heart Study that people with lower saturated fat intakes had higher rates of suicide, depression, a lot of different mortalities. And so there's other literature that supports that, especially with, all of our neurotransmitters, like I said, the hormones, the biological scaffolds that kind of wrap our neurons in our brain, those are derived from cholesterol, fat. Yeah. And so if we're like lacking that, some of the basic, transmission of like thought, serotonin, these different things that we use for mental health aren't there. And so I think it's something that's, really important now too, that we're seeing is mental health with it. But cardiovascular health, metabolism, all that stuff is there.
Word. Now, specifically, let's talk about saturated and unsaturated fats. What are the major differences between those, and what are the major benefits of each of those?
Yeah, so I think where we're seeing now is people are like, okay, I hear the carb thing. So they're not sold on the fat part of it. So you see people get stuck in the middle where they're reducing carbs. They're not going to have a high fat diet. They're not going to have a lot of calories coming from fat. So then they put themselves in this like monosaturated, like avocados, cashews, maybe back into like the egg white conversation. Again, I don't think those are unhealthy at all. I think they're very much important, but they're still afraid of saturated fat. So people kind of, I literally think it comes down to visual. Like I think people literally see an avocado and they go, oh, this is harmless. So they see peanuts like, oh, peanuts would be different, but like cashews or, things like that, they would be like, oh, this doesn't look bad, compared to like, I think it's that basic sometimes that, that people get stuck with that. Like butter, oh, that's going to clog my arteries, but like this shitty vegetable oil, that's fine. Like, I really think that's what people sometimes get caught with. Yeah. So, I think even if you're looking, again, from our previous time together of talking about like what the percentages are of what we should eat, and I need to be 60% fat and, less than 5% carb. If we eat foods that I believe are done in kind of natural patterns, the way we've eaten them for so long, those numbers all work out. Those numbers definitely work out. It was, essentially some type of meat, green leafy vegetables, your hydration perspective, even like your electrolytes through salt, like you like the numbers, the percentages, like that stuff all, totally works out. And then I'm also willing to bet that, their lipid profile, would reflect that. On a personal level, I had to get running around playing pickup basketball. We were talking earlier. Don't do that anymore. Just golf and just kind of stay active.
Oh man, shit.
Yeah, I'm not messing with that. But it was funny. I had to get my blood results, and so I was pretty on point with like eating well. 65-70% of my calories coming from fat. Some proteins. Really low carb. And I remember I got my lipid profile back, and it was really good. It was like the best I've ever seen. My triglycerides were like 42. Like you want them to be under 150. HDL was like in the 70s, which is really important. Right. LDL was low. So point is, that's not a isolated finding. You see that a lot, and so I thought it was really important to have that. But that was derived from the paradox in it is the higher fat that you consume with low carb, the less fat that's like in your blood. It's people think like, oh, I have more fat consumed, I'm going to have more fat in my blood. And depending on what you're eating that with is not the case. It's not the case at all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Any other questions about fats?
I think we covered it all pretty much.
Yeah. Hit a lot. Anything you want to add, bro?
I know there's going to be something you want to add.
Yeah, I do. I think, another aspect to it is satiety. I think part of the issue with, I always say that I think the issue with America in terms of like obesity and metabolic diseases is we're always hungry. Like that's the head of the beast is hunger. So as much as we want to try to suppress hunger through like willpower or through like psychological
what is that?
thought,
What's willpower?
It's crazy to me and it's unfair. So the satiety aspect, like how full we can get from actually eating fatty foods it's another part of the equation that makes it really important, is that, we're supposed to have these foods that are supposed to allow us to go a good amount of time without, having to eat. It goes into the, we were joking about earlier, right? Like breakfast and like eating, every 3 or 4 hours. It's like, if you were like trying to survive, right? Like you'd be so vulnerable if you were like every 3 or 4 hours. Like that's not efficient.
Right.
Like the body wants efficiency. That's the exact opposite. And it's because we eat foods that we digest so quickly, i.e. carbohydrates, polyunsaturated fats, not a lot of saturated fats. We're constantly starving. And so we're constantly having to go back. And now there's a whole hormonal cycle that follows. And it's not working.
I always think of like when I watch, I think about satiety when I watch like National Geographic or like Planet Earth or something. And it's like, oh, the wild bear, like having its meal because it doesn't know when it's going to eat again.
Straight
and
up.
It's like, that's us too. I mean,
really,
it's the same shit.
It really is. We that's the way we derived, and people will go back to like, oh, well, people back then only lived to like 30 years old and this and that. And I think it's a very poor.
That's my plan.
It's a very poor.
Different variables.
It's
though.
so many. I mean, people are dying from like infection and like, not having penicillin. But like, they could walk, 5 flights of stairs and not be out of breath.
True.
They can fucking move things in their backyard and, not have to just rely on like the next door neighbor or someone else doing it. So, right. I'm glad you said that because I think it's a poor comparison.
I think everyone should mess with a little bit of fasting. Like, why not like a little challenge to yourself? Like, there's not always. You never know. There's not always going to be food. Yeah,
listen. That could be a whole other podcast.
Try everything.
Yeah, but like that's really what it is.
Right.
We talked last time counter-regulatory hormones. Things that are supposed to be secreted when we fast, but there's also a level of like we're not meant to eat all day. Like it's just not what we're supposed to do. But it has to be real. It has to be someone not hungry. It can't be like, oh, I don't want to eat, so I'm not going to eat. That's only going to last so long until the body's like, all right, I need sugar. Like, give me this.
Right.
So. That's my take with fat, but there's to wrap it up. There's a lot of good current literature that supports the mental health aspect of it, the cardiovascular. If people are looking at the A to Z study, so ATOZ, it looks at Atkins, traditional diet, Ornish diet, zone diet. They did it out in Stanford. And so it's a varying level of carbohydrate content and fat content. And the Atkins group dominated in everything from not just weight loss, which people are like, oh, Atkins, you do lose weight, but triglyceride level, LDL level, HDL level. So that's a big one. Framingham heart study is another one. So they're out there for people to educate themselves.
Word. All right, we're going to wrap it up there with fats. Thank you for joining us, brother.
Thank you, guys.
Stick around, though. We're going to do another little sode here, but thanks for joining us, man. Glad to have you back.
Me too. Thanks, guys.
Don't be afraid of fat, everyone.
Don't be afraid of fat.
Don't be afraid of that.
Be right back.
Thank you.
Want more of the Strength Students podcast? Go check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, make sure you leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and on Stitcher. Stitcher, I just met her. Welcome back, crew.
Hi.
Hello. We are back. That was General Cory Schwarzkopf reporting for fat benefits, sir. Corey's our man, dude. He's always fun to have on. That was filmed a little while ago, but yeah, Corey's our man. We love having that dude on.
Yeah, known that guy since I was 9 years old.
Super knowledgeable guy. Knows a lot about nutrition. Yeah, right, exactly. So, guys, before we wrap it up here, just throwing out a little warning, a little disclaimer, so not everyone's thrown off. If you guys been following all of our social media, you can see that we got some big changes coming up. Big changes, right? We're going from Pampers to Depends, if you know what I'm talking about.
Did we just skip normal life?
Yep.
Babies to elderly people?
No need for underwear. Just right from Pampers to Depends. So we're freshening things up, everybody. We had a new name coming at you, new logo, new look, freshening things up. We're headed in a little different direction, right? So the Strength Students will be no more. Fuckers. For those of you guys who have followed the Strength Students, thanks so much, but we'll be ringing in the new year with a new look,
new name,
new logo, new name, and
everything else is pretty
new
much
philosophy, new spirit.
It's definitely
don't be afraid though. Nothing's going anywhere. All your favorite videos and episodes are still going to be here.
We're firing Steve, and
I'm out.
That's
no. We're going to work for Costco. We're doing a podcast there. How to bulk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Just right off the top of the old dome there.
The old Ginger Dome.
Ginger Dome.
That's where the Vikings play.
My favorite fucking football stadium. But yeah, everything's going to be the same, guys. Like, we're going to be the same on Instagram, Facebook. Same dudes, same personalities, same locations. Nothing. You're not going to have to find us anywhere. Just everything's going to change names. So don't be alarmed by that. Mm-hmm. If you see Strength Squad on your feeds, that's us still. Yeah. It's us. It's us. God damn it. So yeah, just a heads up to that. And we're looking forward to the new year.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the new year. New year, who dis? New podcast, who dis? Same podcast though, so it's us. That's answering your question. But yeah, guys, so that's what we got coming at you next week, which is going to be the first week of the new year. So sit tight. I know you guys are highly anticipating it.
Oh, we know.
Don't wet your Pampers because we got you guys some Depends.
What is this diaper joke?
I'm not sure. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for us today.
For the year.
For the year, man. It's going to wrap it up for the year, and it's going to wrap it up for the Strength Students podcast.
See you in 2018.
See you in 2018, boy and girl.
One girl, probably.
Deuces. One girl, probably. Want more of the Strength Students podcast? Go check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, make sure you leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and on Stitcher. Stitcher, I just met her.